let's conclude Lecture 5. In Lecture 5, we have talked about inequality and welfare programs. So we first looked at the data and saw that there is inequality globally as well as within countries. And inequality is seen as a problem in many countries or a challenge that should be addressed. Especially when inequality and the fact that some people are very poor in a society is the result of negative economic shocks. So when people's poverty is perceived as not being the result of one's own decisions, but it's just something that you have no control over, then there is a strong desire for a government to insure people against negative economic shocks. And we've also learned then what are the basic welfare programs that are put in place to address this problem. Now, we learned that welfare programs are important, but we also learned that they come with challenges. And the main challenge is called moral hazard. The problem here is that the government only observes people's outcomes. So they observe, for example, who is poor and who is not, but they don't observe people's earnings potential or people's potential to do well in life. And if you have a situation where you have people who are poor, and among those, some are poor out of no fault of their own, and others are poor because they choose not to work. Now, this is not a value statement here, not a value judgment. This is just suppose this exists, then you have the problem of moral hazard. Because then some people have the incentive to make themselves look poor, poorer than they would actually be if they just worked. And so that then leads very often to controversial political debates. So you see in many countries that you have groups that advocate a low or less generous welfare state, simply for the reason that they want to, that their argument is that people are trapped in this welfare trap. So the welfare state does not provide incentives for people to work, so that traps them and their children in welfare. Whereas if we lowered the benefit levels, they would have an incentive to work and then actually earn their living themselves. My own country, Germany, has had a big social reform in the early 2000s that tried to do exactly this and was actually quite successful. Lowered the benefit levels, and at the same time provided training and so on for people, but at the core of the so-called Hartz reforms was actually to provide people to make it less comfortable for people to be on unemployment benefits and the benefit levels were reduced and so on. Now, so if we have this problem of moral hazard, the question is, what can we do besides reducing benefit? And I've shown that there are other things one can do. So you can either try to target people who you can pinpoint as being important recipients of a welfare benefit. For example, people with a disability, for example, single parents, for example, parents in general, where it's very clear who belongs in that category and who doesn't. The easier it is to just pretend for someone to belong into that category, the more likely is the problem of moral hazard to occur. We've also learned that another way of addressing the problem of moral hazard is through improvements of the outside option, and that's in my view, and I guess lots of people would agree with me, the most desirable ways to address the problem of inequality poverty because it directly improves people's life chances. The tricky thing is how to actually do that. Not every person, not every group in the population that is poor, not every group's outside options can be so easily improved. So if we have that opportunity, if we can retrain people, if we can improve their wage in some other way, that's great, and we should probably do that. But otherwise, we just have to find other ways of addressing the problem of poverty, such as unemployment benefits, social benefits. So the bottom line here is welfare programs are important. You can find them in almost any country in the world, and they are never without challenges. But just because there are challenges doesn't mean we should just abandon them altogether. It is actually a very, very interesting and exciting research field for economists these days and has been for a very long time. So lots of economists these days are doing research on inequality, the causes and consequences of inequality, and are trying to find ways to improve the functioning of the welfare state, such as trying to design welfare programs that provide the right incentives to the right people while reducing inequality and reducing poverty. So if you are thinking of becoming an economist, that would certainly be a very, very important field to get into.